So Dane, it is so lovely to see you again. I was thinking the last time we saw each other was, and we're going to sound like wankers for this, was actually in Cannes. We were at the Martinez, Katie and Susanna and Miller and Julianne. So it's that was about, I think that was about 3-4 years ago now.
Yeah, probably 4 years ago at this point. When you said you were afraid we're gonna sound like wankers, I'm like, no. And then as soon as you said can, I was like, oh yeah, we're about.
Yeah, we're totally gonna sound like wankers. But we're really gonna sound like wankers now. The first time we met was actually in Cascais in Portugal. The video conference.
We're really off to a rocking start here to make this relatable and like inclusive, right? Like Cascais, can, yeah.
100%. We've come a long way, and I'm so glad that I still know you from the other side of the universe. And thank you for taking the time to talk to me. I know you're in the middle of moving from San Fran to LA, like literally in 2 days' time. So I'm very, very grateful for you making space and doing it amongst your packing boxes. So I just wanted to sort of start off with a bit of context for everyone about you. So you are an incredible human being, and you've achieved more in 15 years than most people have in a lifetime. And you're still relentlessly pursuing greater heights, like a space shuttle trying to get up into orbit. So I'm not surprised, given that you knew you wanted to get into advertising when you were 10 years old. I mean, that's focus from a very young age. And also, like, you've achieved like incredible success, like, you know, globally, creatively, commercially, in the advertising industry, working on Coke, Snickers, Mercedes, Guinness, Subway, and The Economist. You've held executive leadership roles at BBDO New York with our wonderful friend Susanna, and AMV with our wonderful friend Katie. And then you're also the youngest EVP at McCann Worldwide. So once you nailed advertising, you thought that wasn't enough. You went off and decided to make a leap into tech, and you've moved to Google, where you're now the global consumer marketing lead for Pixel, if that's correct.
Yeah, Pixel, and they just threw Nest in the mix a couple of months ago as well. So all the lovely doorbells and thermostats and cameras and all that stuff. But yeah, that's 2.5 years
on your promotion / extra workload.
Yeah, other way around, but yes.
And just a very, very brief overview, I guess, of some of your key achievements, because it literally took me a week to try and work out how to summarize them. That for context for everyone, you were part of launching the Super Bowl ad for Snickers for Betty White, which basically launched the You're Not You When You're Hungry campaign into 56 markets. You were the global Snickers brand leader at AMV, responsible for 80 markets and growing global sales by 16% and helping it become the second chocolate brand in the world. You also launched Coca-Cola Taste the Feeling, the global campaign for McCann, into 64 markets. And you were in charge of 64 markets, and you launched it in 218 countries. And then when you went to Google, you also launched the Childish Gambino campaign, which was at the Grammys, which was incredible. And it went viral within the first 48 hours, 8.9 million impressions. The Playground app had 248% increase in opens, and the Play emoji downloads doubled to 223%. And then on top of your professional achievements, you've also been acknowledged by the industry. So in 2018, you were inducted into the American Advertising Federation Hall of Fame for your advertising achievements over 10 years. And in 2019, you received the AdColor Rockstar Award for a track record as an industry leader and visionary and ED&I champion. And then on the side, when you have spare time, you're also a panelist, a volunteer, and mentor to dozens of community programs, which we'll talk a little bit more about later on. And you also have an executive certificate in strategy and innovation from MIT, and you're a graduate of the Harvard Digital Marketing Program. I mean, that's an impressive roll call, my friend.
I think you got the wrong email. That was somebody else's thing.
No. That just blows my mind. Like, I get tired just kind of running through what you've done over the span of 15 years. So I'm just wondering, I mean, they're all such incredible. They're not just one little flash in the pan. These are big world stage kind of achievements. And I'm wondering if there's a way that you can actually pick out of them all one that was particularly special or formative for you, and if so, why?
Well, just as you did that linearly, I won't take any credit for the Betty White thing. That was I was sort of a fly on the team at that point, who was more so focused on some of the other chocolate brands, and that was like the wisdom of Kirsten and Catherine and those guys. And then somehow over time, that became the opportunity that let me step into a leadership role on Snickers in the US and then in UK and globally. But if I had to pick one of those things that was most special, I'll cheat and I'll do two. And they were on the back half of sort of the recounting. The induction into the Advertising Hall of Achievement was great because my parents got to come. So they got to sort of see that and so much of what I do, and that story of that 10-year-old who wants to be in advertising. It starts with them in a conversation with my mom. So to have that full circle moment and be recognized within the industry for that, the medal and all that, it doesn't like matter to me much, but just to have that moment and that memory and the pictures, like that was pretty special because it was one way that I get to thank them in front of a bunch of people for their investment in me and their sort of rearing. And then the Rockstar one, although my parents weren't there, that was also pretty special because it was a room full of mentors, mentees, peers, co-workers. It was basically, because that is such an industry sort of like moment, it was so many people of significance in my journey, in my life, in one room. And for me to feel like I'm still on a journey, but I'm at this point of the journey, to be able to look backwards, forwards, that was a pretty cool feeling as well. So yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty cool when all your kind of efforts can sort of almost go full circle. Sort of feels like a close of a chapter before you move on to a new one, especially when there's parents involved and mentors and peers that have been with you through the whole journey to actually just go, this is what it's all been for. Well, not that it was a pinnacle moment, but it's a nice acknowledgement and I guess a reflection, because we don't take a lot of time in our society to celebrate our achievements. We're sort of like, cool, yeah, done, and then on to the next one. So I think things like that are really lovely, and also particularly with parents, because it's so hard to explain to them what you do.
Yeah, I could have been up there just getting any award, but they would have been just as proud. But, for them to sort of be in a room, to see the pomp and circumstance, to have met some people that also came to support, like that meant the world to me. And then just the look in their eyes was like, all right, like I did something right. It was like a different type of fulfillment.
Yeah, it's incredible. And I think obviously you've got such an impressive, professional persona. And personally as well, I know you and I know you're an incredible human being. But what else is there about Dhane that defines you that may not be immediately obvious to other people?
That kind of contradictory saying of like an introverted extrovert. I've always thrived on social energy. I sort of feel like emotional intelligence is one of my strengths. Obviously, you can apply that a ton when you work in advertising and marketing. You have to understand consumers, you have to relate to very different types of people to get them to collaborate. So I've always leaned on that as a skill. And I've also always been an externally very social person, but there's a big part of me that is a homebody that sort of needs to regain that energy. So there's this weird thing where the public persona of who I am, the things that I do enjoy doing, I think many people probably would be surprised to learn that I enjoy being in. I enjoy actually not having to be as connected to the outside world and the people for extended periods of time. So yeah, that weird sort of dynamic of introvert, extrovert is true of me.
Yeah, and I think it's funny because during lockdown, a lot of people that I work with or friends with in advertising and marketing have sort of realized that they're actually really introverted. Because being forced into lockdown, they're like, I actually really like this, being on my own a lot. But I think, and I relate exactly to what you're saying, because I present as extroverted, but I'm actually by nature very introverted. But I think because of the nature of what we do, you need a level of extroversion to do your job and be social. But then counteract in equal measure, I need that level of introversion to actually get me back to zero again. Otherwise, I just become so depleted.
That's interesting. I think for me, it just came from being I was kind of a runt when I was younger. So I needed to quickly adapt and build some tools to be able to it's like a defense mechanism. It was an equalizer, being social, tapping into that emotional intelligence, being funny, all those kind of things. And it just kind of always stuck with me, and it became my external identity in so many ways. And then I ended up in an industry where it was a strength. So, yeah.
It worked out well.
Yeah.
So I guess in terms of like thinking about one of your other strategies, in one of your previous presentations, you've mentioned your motto in life is to hunt discomfort. And you have an incredible like standard for yourself, like personally and professionally, like always pushing yourself into like out of your comfort zone, into places where you're not comfortable. And I think I can see from what you've told me where you get that from. Like your parents were very self-made as well. Like your mum was working at a post office while putting herself through night school and is now a managing director at a marketing company. Your dad was, I think, a HR professional, went to work in a supermarket and then went to become an entrepreneur himself. And then you even spoke about, I think, when you were coming up through advertising, living in sort of rent subsidized apartments and eating noodles. And while your 35-year-old colleagues were having their rent paid. So
Yeah.
never expected a handout, and you've definitely always taken responsibility for your own personal development and growth. And you mentioned, I think, two seminal, I guess, moments in your career. And the first one was putting up your hand for a job that no one wanted to do at BIPOC New York, which kind of led you into doing working on the Betty White ad. And I think I had a similar experience as well in Australia on Mars Chocolate with Hunger Rhythm. So there was a project, a sales project on the future of the future of impulse work streams. So basically like the future of 7-Eleven sales and stuff. And there was crickets for people putting their hand up to do it. And I went, yeah, I'll do it because I'll get to know the sales function better. It ended up being with the sales director, a guy called Matty G, who ended up being the client I did Hunger Rhythm with in the end. So, and it's not to say that you should put your hand up for things because you never know where people are going to end up. But I think the depth of knowledge when you go above and beyond always seems to pay itself off. Like it did you when you kind of got onto, the Betty White ad from taking on that project. So I wonder, what advice do you have, particularly for minority groups, on how to cultivate their own opportunities for themselves in systems that are still, let's face it, pretty classist, very cliquey, and there's still a bit of a boys' club sentiment there?
Yeah, I mean, this is a lesson that took me a while to learn. I'm still trying to reteach it to myself every day and like live it a little bit more truly every day. My advice, if you're an other, in whatever sort of category that may find you, is trying to find a way to make this not sound cliche, but I would say lean into all of who you are and do it humbly, but do it loudly. I would say it took me a while. Like I spent so much of my time that I look back as a waste. And even now coming into tech, I had to recalibrate, but trying to sort of assimilate more than acclimate, trying to look for the sort of answer as to the right way to do this, the right way to be, the right way to fit in, whether that be the sort of cultural cues and things my social life brought into the professional environment, finding those points of connection with other people, hiding. Well, in essence, what that search did was hide so many authentic parts of me and my story, my journey, and things that I sort of was energized by. And I didn't realize that there's value in those things and me representing those things. And so I think at some point I realized it's okay to be myself. And it's actually a unique thing that is part of what other people are seeking. So I'm going to build a strategy around being me and leaving this equity, or building this equity and leaving this impression that like who I am and what I contribute when I show up in a room is sought after. But I want that to not be a false thing. I want that to come from who I am. And I can see a connection there between what we are tasked with doing and delivering and me contributing from my own unique experience. So I think approaching that strategically is a strength, and it's empowering, and it builds confidence, and it allows you to sort of show up by default as your true self. It allows others to invite you for the very reason of who you are as a person. So that has taken me years to understand and try to craft, and I'm still working on that. But I wish I had known that earlier. So I would definitely give that advice. Like, approach yourself as, again, I wouldn't say a brand because that's like overblown and whatever, like we're humans, but like build a strategy for how you're going to be able to show up and create a lane to be your true self, and how that's going to be sought after in whatever you do.
Yeah.
And that's easier said than done, of course, but there's going to be some connection points, or you need to be out of there, right? Like,
yeah, which kind of like leads into the next question I was going to ask you, because I listened to a post interview that you did after you received the Rockstar Award, and you were talking specifically around that, about the tension around assimilating versus integrating. And like you said, if you're a sort of an other in the other group, there's always, I think, that conflict, because there's that internal dialogue telling yourself constantly that you do belong, even though it doesn't look like you belong and it doesn't sound like you belong. And there's also, I think, a lot of conflict as well inside, because when you're in structures that weren't built for you specifically to succeed, there's a lot of, I guess, internal negotiation about what you acclimate to and then what you hold the line on. So I wonder, like, if you've had any lessons in your experience about what the threshold is for you, because like you say, the best way to do it is to show up as yourself and know that it is enough and it is worthy and it is in demand. But then how do you pick your battles to win the war? Like, so how do you decide what the threshold is to go, you know what, I can let that one slide, or it's not worth my time and energy? And then when do you go, no, that's not happening on my watch, I'm saying something that's not right?
I think I look at it like a sliding scale. I think the more comfortable, and I'm still not this immensely confident person. I think that'd be another surprising thing to like admit externally, but I'm at least confident enough to admit that right now. But I think as I've gained incremental confidence in my ability to deliver unique value, I've realized later in my career that the things I should care about, the lines that I should be drawing, are those things that feel most egregiously threatening to me being that authentic version of myself that I was talking about before. The things that feel purposeful or intentional, or even if they're not intentional, the things that like would require me to go back to that place that I felt I've like evolved beyond, which is you're muting yourself to a certain degree. You're showing up as an inauthentic version of yourself. You're projecting what you think you. So it's still a journey, but that is where I'm trying to draw the line now. I'm just like, all right, like I am here I've earned my ability to be here just as well as anybody else in this room. I have a unique perspective, again, delivered humbly. But you know, if nobody wants that, or that doesn't like land with people, I'm not going to take it personally. But I should always at least know that I'm here for a reason, and I should be able to speak from my own truth, speak from my own experience, whether it lands or not. So where it feels like that is being muted or suppressed, that's where I kind of draw the line.
Yeah, because I think it's almost like a felt sense too when you come across it, right? You just sort of know there's that feeling that comes up inside of you that just goes, oh no, hell no, like, you know, that's not going to fly on my watch. And then other things you kind of go, yeah, it's not ideal, but I can let that one slide, because in terms of it affecting the outcome or my identity, null and void.
It's really interesting to like apply that lens retrospectively, because now I think of certain moments in my career, and some of them were kind of extreme, but where because I was more junior, or it was like, again, so much of my identity and my perception of success and what I wanted to achieve was after a job, I didn't say anything. I let it pass. I felt super uncomfortable. I carried that. I still carry that, you know? Those are the things that I wish I could go back in time and like say something or speak from a more true place. But, you know, lesson learned to some extent.
Yeah, look, similar as well. And I think we need to have compassion for ourselves, because I think the mindset back then when we were juniors was not as open-minded or safe. And, you know, like you say, you're balancing, you know, your career and your viability at an organization. So it's tricky. So, yeah, I have had to sort of come to terms with those demons with myself as well. I think the intersectional lens that I think white people don't understand with other groups or marginalized groups is that there is also this pressure, and you spoke about it as well, about being the only. So like there's also like an extra layer of feeling like you've got to represent your community because you are the only one of your kind in that room or in that specific situation. And you take that quite seriously. I think you mentioned that in the post-interview award. When you received the Rockstar Award, you said, I kind of feel like it's my responsibility to represent the community and the potential of the community, which is huge. It's huge. That's massive. That's got to play on your mind. And I wonder whether you feel that it's an honor that you are in that position to be able to do that, or is it a burden, or a bit of both?
Yeah, it's an honor that comes with burdens, right? Like both. But at the same time, burden is all like in the eye of the beholder, because this is not the 1800s. It's not the like we're more so talking about within a contained corporate environment, microaggressions, things of that nature. So that in itself is, I try to always keep perspective of like a lot of people have fought for me to be able to have this opportunity. I owe the sort of my leaning in to normalize certain things, open the door a little bit wider. But like I'm at a point in this generational journey that is, getting better and nowhere near what it would have been to like have existed in previous eras. I'm honored because, within the sort of small scope of an industry, and the industry is not small, but like in historical comparison, the industry needing to sort of right its wrongs and just sort of benefit from and evolve to a place that is more representative and sort of more diverse in its outputs. There are people who were the only ones who opened the door for me and provided an opportunity and saw that opportunity to sort of reach back and change history by that little much of a dial. So like I have that responsibility to do that. I'm fulfilled by that within the corporate setting, beyond the corporate setting, to say like, hey, if you have a wild imagination, you love to write, you love to draw, there's like a career field where you can make good money doing that, which now the modern version is code, design, all that stuff. But I just love to be the person that I used to go to a school in Atlanta to their career days, and it was firefighters, police. It was a whole range of careers. Actually, I've gone to a fair amount, and I'm always the guy that's trying to figure out, how do I tell this narrative of like what I do to like kids, I'm like, well, there's a part of me that just still feels like that kid in my day-to-day job and what I enjoy about it. These brands with so much visibility and kind of creating meaning for them and telling stories. And so I try to relate on that level, but yeah, I do feel it's a responsibility. The burden part, again, I don't want to overstate it, but it's just, it does require at times, you didn't ask for that. You didn't, you just wanted a job. You just wanted to like pick a career and succeed. But little did I know when I was 10 years old that like, oh, I picked an industry that like, it's like 2% at the time or 3% people that look like me. And oh, there are other people that I work with that are going to have a leg up, and I wonder how that's going to affect me psychologically or in terms of like, the day-to-day of this thing. So, the burden is realizing that once you step into it, yes, you have the responsibility of representing a community, but you're caught between a vice of how much of myself do I lose in order to like succeed here, and who and what do I lose along the way to do that for my community, my past, my history. And it's never good enough, right? Like you can overstep that line and feel like, yeah, I'm on the right path of success. And it's like, it's all empty and void to some extent. Have you sold yourself out to truly get the next title, get the next job? Like what are you left with? And how far away are you from your roots and the things that you more naturally sort of are connected to? So I think the burden of that is sometimes felt.
Yeah, because I think I read as well, like you've given in some of your previous advice to emerging leaders, you've said things like, don't ask for permission, don't overthink it, be exceptional, give them no excuse, which is like that's a lot of pressure. And I know that's how you live it. And I know that there's truth in that, in order for us to kind of be more visible in leadership positions and in organizations and stuff like that. But it feels incredibly unfair to me. And I think, I'd love to get your perspective on what else you think is necessary to level the playing field. I mean, a couple of months ago, I read that Hollywood has just announced its 2025 inclusion initiative, which means I think the Best Picture Oscar can't be won by a film that doesn't have diverse makeup, whether it's in the production or in the cast. And that's causing a whole, range of hubbub going, is that fair? That's not fair, blah, blah, blah. And I kind of go, whether or not quotas are right, the intention behind it is to say, we're not making progress in this space fast enough, so we're going to legislate it. Because if you were doing it on your own, we wouldn't need to put this in. So I'd love your perspective on, what else you think needs to happen, apart from, people of color and your marginalized groups being exceptional and outstanding and, giving them no reason to not say yes to us. What else do you feel needs to happen to level the playing field? Like, is it quotas or what else?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I have a response to that, but before I specifically answer that, I do still kind of, I guess it's reflected in sort of the directness of some of those things you quoted me on saying. I don't want to empower, or I don't want to place my power in somebody else's hands to like create a more equal world for me. I think I'm in America right now, if I'm being honest. There was never an equal playing field in America, right? Like there's some people that are just waking up to that fact. If you look at the world in itself, like the narrative is pretty much the same. So I don't want to place too much, and this probably sounds too cynical, I don't want to place too much hope in like somebody else seeing the light, leveling the playing field. Now, of course, there are tons of allies, there's a ton of awareness happening because of technology and global conversations and things of that nature, but I always want to retain a little bit of that agency for myself.
Yeah.
Because the historical precedent hasn't proven that like this is a promised land that we've ever been to and we just need to return to it. But things that people who aren't people of color could do or should be doing. I mean, look, we had a lot of this dialogue after the George Floyd thing, but there's just the like listening, using your platform and realizing how you can use your platform to sort of make a difference, no matter what industry you're in, no matter what role, no matter what level, whether it's through a peer, through an organizational-led initiative or commitment, like having that conversation with yourself, if you truly care, to understand where is my little sort of corner of change that I can make, right? Like if I do truly see things this way and believe that a better version of the world looks like this, is it hiring? Is it representation? Is it the narratives we put out? Is it, the suppliers we use? Is it the money we spend? Like there's a ton of outlets. But I think outside of the professional world, I think the biggest thing that could be done is I think it's generational. So how people raise their kids, what they teach their kids, what they create as the norm. And we see a lot of that happening. That's where the real shift happens. I think you can shift a company culture. You can shift an industry to some extent with quotas and the like. But generational change is going to come from how these kids are raised. And I think these things happening and being so visible will make it impossible to hide this, to have those conversations and pick a side. That is what gives me hope. And hopefully I'm still alive to see how evolved we are on the other side of that.
Yeah, because I think you said absolutely right. Since Black Lives Matter happened, there was a flurry of activity. Some people launched into action, like they're scrambling to get, ED&I initiatives up and running. Some have been very quick to invest in businesses, like actually put their money where their mouth is. There's a big bunch sitting in the middle that are paralyzed by fear of doing the wrong thing. And there are some that are just waiting for an economic punitive repercussion before they move. They're just kind of looking around going, not everyone's doing it yet, I'm just going to wait. Fuck those guys. But the ones in the middle, like you said, are the ones that actually need to be using their positions and their platforms of influence and speaking out. Like it's very, very quiet. Ever since Black Lives Matter went down, there was a flurry of activity and then it got super quiet. And I don't think it's because people don't care. I think that they're scared to be called out as performative. And I think, one thing I think white people don't realize is that it's actually quite tiring. And I always see that it's always people of color or marginalized groups, the ones flying the flag to kind of champion change. I mean, you did that with Google with the Marcus Graham initiative, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. Even with the Trump election, the swing states were from the Native Americans and Black women.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so like it's sort of, it's a tricky one, how to sort of compassionately compel white people in positions of power to go, can you chip in too? because there's a bunch of us doing a lot of stuff, but we need to do this together. It's not about creating divisions between white and, everyone else. But the fact of the matter is the systems that we live in, whether they're social, political, economic, business, are racist. So we need, and it's a very difficult conversation that we need to have with leaders currently, that are in power. And some of them are slowly coming to terms with it, and they're putting their money where their mouth is. But others are just sitting in the middle. So your advice, the ones sitting in the middle, is like just do one thing at a time, something small that you can influence that's heartfelt and authentic.
Yeah, and look, I think you're exactly right about the fear point. I was just thinking about it. I mean, this comes from that notion, I think, has a little sense of entitlement in it, that this is a problem, and I can choose to say, I don't even see it. I can choose to say, I didn't create it. I can choose to say, I've done something about it, and that's enough. But there's a way to separate the acknowledgement of the issues, even though they don't directly impact you, caring enough about it to say, I might not be the best place to come up with a solution to the thing, but I care enough to give voice to a person who is, right? Just even that thing, it comes just from, if you have issues with fairness and unfairness, right? Without us even going down the wormhole of whether it's criminal justice or it's education or any of these systems that you can have an argument about, how the chips are stacked. Just if you're a person that generally believes in fairness and you have some ability to sort of influence, make an impact, bring someone whose lived experience is more sort of proximate to the unfair side of that to figure out what you can do, or give them your platform temporarily to do what, it's just, there was a thing where a bunch of actresses in Hollywood provided their Instagram pages for a day for up and coming Black actresses, or Google pointing out Black businesses during the George, it's just things like that where it's all right, you don't have to be the end all be all solution to the problem. Sometimes you just need to give voice to the other side of it,
Yeah, totally. It's just an extension of personal growth, isn't it? It's not about being an ally necessarily or an accomplice. It's just about you growing as a person and sort of living your values, sort of thing, and seeking out the things that you don't know enough about to learn about them. And sometimes they're from other people, sometimes they're from textbooks. And I think, that kind of ladders back into your second seminal moment that you've spoken about, which is always about, you have a growth mindset on steroids. It's pretty incredible. And I'm not surprised given what you've achieved. So the second seminal moment in your career that you spoke about in another interview was you actually moving to London when you were 30 years old. Took a huge pay cut, took a title cut. You'd never traveled out of the States before. It was hard, but it was rewarding because you got to travel all around Europe and stuff like that. And it set you up for global roles ever since. And then once you kind of got comfortable there, you decided, oh, hell, I'll go leave the ad industry and go into tech at Google. So that is something you've imposed upon yourself. And I think that's what we were kind of talking about, that these leaders should do as well. It's kind of taking the onus and going, how do I develop and level up as a leader and as a person, because this is the new world order that is slowly emerging, that is more inclusive and diverse and less tolerant of inequity. So I'm wondering as well, in terms of your growth mindset on steroids mindset, what have you found the benefits and the pitfalls are of being so driven and so kind of focused about leveling up? I mean, the upside obviously is you have achieved incredible things. Are there any other benefits that aren't immediately obvious, and what have the pitfalls of that kind of determined nature been?
I think the benefits, and again, there's so many people, it's just I'm flattered and humbled that you would even describe me in that way. I'm super intrigued by growth mindset, flow states and the like, and how it applies to everything from athletics to, science and just all the surrounding elements around it. Because I do feel like we as human beings haven't anywhere nearly as much tapped our capacity. The benefit if I were to like earn my way into the rights of a person that has a growth mindset on steroids would be, it's like, I'm into like variety, and having a growth mindset means like I can choose to like pivot my story in this direction or that direction, and one way or another, whether I turn left or I turn right, is hard work. And I'm familiar enough with hard work where it's not going to feel great in the moment, but I've done this enough times to know there's something on the other side of it. I'll evolve as a person. So like that notion of agency and control over life and where I go and what I lean into, I think is freeing for me and exciting for me. And I don't have the same boundaries and parameters maybe as everybody else in terms of what you might look at an age milestone as, or a career milestone. It's just like, all right, like if I want to, like if I want it bad enough, I can change that. So that is, I think, a benefit, just like this constant notion of I'm in the driver's seat and something exciting's on the other side of it, and like, where do I want to go today? The downsides for myself, speaking from experience, are an erosion of self, right? You're so committed to growth and experience and like ascent that like the things you used to enjoy doing, you don't do anymore. Relationships fray, you know, you're so like single-minded and focused. You know, I actually have a friend that's visiting here right now from Australia, and he unfortunately had to come over because of family issue, but he's like, I know you're moving. I'm going from San Fran to LA. So like, I want to catch you in San Fran, I catch you in LA. And I'm just by default now used to like, and this is somebody that I was very, very close with, and I haven't seen in years. They're used to be like, I work from 8 to 8 and like, I'm just dead at the end of the day. So like, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to see you. So it's just, all my effort is put there, and it's not put into like things that'll make me more happy and fulfilled and connections, and that stuff frays. I've got a friend that's been calling me for like 2 months, and like just becoming easier to not, because I'm communicating with people all day, and he's taking it personally, and I'm just like, no, that relationship is free. Anyway.
Yeah.
So the loss of self, the distance between the things that might balance you and fulfill you, definitely. And then what do you do at the end of all that? You look up and what do you have? Some awards, a title, you know, like a retirement account. But at the end of the day, like what is that worth? So I would like to get to a point in my life where there's a little bit more balance. And I know, again, that's my agency, that's on me to discover, but that is a big downside that I'm coming to terms with now that I've thrown myself into yet again another uncomfortable situation that's required that much more of my self-sacrifice and commitment of my time. So yeah, I would say that those are some big downsides.
Yeah, but I think what's lovely about you is that you, despite your incredibly busy schedule, you've always, as you've risen up, taken the time to reach back. So like you work on a number of like community initiatives as a mentor, a panelist, a volunteer, a speaker, and an investor. So like with Google, you're spearheading the Marcus Graham project, which is the first of its kind. So like 11 students have live briefs and training. You're on the ED&I Council. You mentor at the intersection of creativity, business, diversity, and social justice, like incredible programs like Shooting Without Bullets around youth activism via photography, for Freedom's art project with Hank Williams to kind of promote deeper discussion around sort of social justice issues, multicultural advertising intern program, women and minority and small business owners, and you do a lot of special ed mentoring with underprivileged primary school students through Project Happy, Heritage Academy, and you've been a speaker and a panelist for thought leaderships, like subjects on creativity and social justice for Forbes, P&G, LeGrant Foundation, and during Black History Month. So I think, I know it has been painful for you going through all of these learning experiences as you find your feet, as you've ascended, I guess, in corporate structures, but you're so like naturally uplifting, because when I heard you interviewed in the Unexpected Success podcast, you could just hear the delight in their voices about the advice that you were giving them. And obviously you do so much proactive work to give back, because as you say, the real change is going to come from the next generation and from them having a sense of self-worth and awareness about their value. So I'm wondering, out of all of those experiences that you've had, are there any that are particularly, that stand out to you, that remind you, this is why I do it? Or that's just, you know, if nothing else happens, it was all worth it because I could help this individual or this group, or like, this is the feeling, this is what it's about.
Yeah, there's so much of that. I mean, I think on the spectrum of pure professionally driven things that might be draining for who I am as a person, but also fulfilling professionally, and that being such a focus. And then the other side of that spectrum being like, what are the things that you just have nothing to do with your professional ambitions and that you just enjoy as a person? If I've lost on one side of that spectrum and I've over-indexed on the other side, which is the professional side, all those things you just described sit squarely between both. It's the thing that says, the part of me as a real normal human being that got into this world and that still sort of delivers value in the world, I can be that example. I can work, I can lend my expertise, my perspective, sort of an inspiring example to other people that is much more grounded and not the like political, this sort of like ladder climbing sort of thing. It's more of the just, there is an element of what I do that is fun and visible by a lot of people, and that other people really like love to see what's behind that, to talk about it. So there is that is a much more like grounded in who I am version of what success has brought and allowed me to do and represent to other people. If I were to pick any like seminal example of what you listed, they all just do so many different things. I think I guess I really love working with people who people have given up on or underestimate.
Yeah.
So like you mentioned, there's a few special needs programs that I work with, and like, man, like those kids and like the interactions there and like the lessons I've learned, just like amazing. And there's this reading program that I was supposed to be a part of in San Francisco before I was moving and like kind of going through an existential breakdown. But like I was looking forward to that because it was like, okay, I get to like work with kids again, and in the capacity where like it's about storytelling or creative writing, or it's about, I mean, some of those kids I worked with physical fitness type of thing. But that to me is cool because, like I said, I just believe we all can do so much more, and I learned so much more about like my own self and the things I might complain to myself about, growth mindset or not, that I just shouldn't because of the like obstacles that these guys and girls are sort of not letting stop them, and like the things that they're doing and the dreams that they're having. Like I need that reminder. It's super grounding, and it's like, man, like I've got it great and I have no reason to complain.
Yeah, it really keeps you in check, doesn't it? Like in terms of what it's all about, because otherwise, particularly in certain industries, you can get trapped in that vacuum, just trying to impress people from that same industry. It's like, well, no, what's your real world impact? Like in terms of like actual people that have been physically impacted by your legacy or your presence or your generosity or your kind of your time and stuff like that. And I think you do that in spades. So I think that you're very real in person as well, which is why I think you're inspiring so many people, which is fantastic. And I love that you're doing that. And I think even in what you're doing now at Google and sort of, I guess, championing diverse narratives and storytelling, like bringing in Kashmir to do the Childish Gambino campaign. I mean, you said that the reason you wanted to do that was you wanted to create a moment in culture that was talked about with the right mixology of creative and strategic partners. And the outcome was amazing. Like it was phenomenal. So I'm wondering, like, I mean, we are seeing that there is a bit more momentum now about the importance in the diversity of storytelling narratives and the effect that it has on people and their self-worth. Like, you know, Disney are moving, Marvel, Netflix, all those guys. Even Joaquin Phoenix, his speech last year at the BAFTAs, I don't know if you saw that, it was incredible. Basically saying like, we need to fix this problem. Like me being up here is a privilege, but we're saying to people of color, you're not welcome here. So there's definitely like, it's getting a very, very high profile. So I'd love to get your thoughts on why you thought it was important to bring Kashmir into that project and what difference it made to it versus not having them.
A few reasons. Well, the reason I even knew Kashmir was because of Ad Color. And again, Tiffany Warren was like, hey, I have somebody I want you to meet. And these guys have this agency. They're doing cool stuff. And they were doing a bunch of stuff with Snoop and super interesting. It was just like a contact. I didn't know how it was going to come full circle. I tried to bring them on some Coca-Cola stuff at some point. It didn't really flesh out. And then like years later, I ended up with this Google job. So the first reason is, the reason I even had the Google job was because there was a senior level Black exec who was looking for a specific type of casting for like how to make this brand culturally relevant, somebody with agency experience and whatever. So I realized that, again, this was a moment where who I was, my experiences, but who I authentically was what was being asked for in the role. And then him giving me this project, because he knew that like it could turn out very differently had anybody else. So it was my first project at Google. I was like, this feels so comfortable because it's like tied to music and a culture that I'm familiar with. So that's one part of it. The other part of it was the only reason Google was even able to capture that Childish Gambino emoji from a tech standpoint was Donald Glover, who, for those that don't know, is also Childish Gambino. That's his like rap thing. He was amazed by the technology, but most specifically by the technology's ability to mimic Black movement and the fluidity of Black movement. So he's at the table because of that in the tech and how it could sort of, unlike other AR, VR tech, like mimic Black movement. I'm at the table because I got this opportunity from somebody else that looks like me to do what we do. So of course, at that point, I'm like, I got to bring the right partner on. And, you know, we did a pitch and we had a couple agencies pitch. So it wasn't like guaranteed, but of course, because it required some understanding of culture and music and how to show up and do it authentically, with everything from like social media posts and the messaging within that to how you interact with the sort of talent at the center of this. They knocked it out the park and got it, and it opened the door for them to get other opportunities within Google. And they got a Multicultural Agency of the Year after that. They won a Cannes Lion alongside us. So like, yeah, I'm still very close with them, but it was just that thing where it was like, all right, just if this is what you want, you've got to have the right mix of people that kind of like this is like native to, and let us just do our thing. And like, I'm glad it played out that way. But yeah, that was why I felt an agency like them or they need to be at the table.
Yeah, because I think that's the slam dunk, right? If you just have the right diversity of mix in your teams, you're never going to get a Pepsi Kylie Jenner ad, right? So, but the problem is that takes some time to build up. Like it's otherwise, you know, you can't go racing on the street and just grabbing brown people and marginalized people to pop into your teams. Like, so that's going to take time because it's a new kind of, I think, focus area for businesses. So I think getting it right is, well, actually that, you know, they've got to look at their own, I guess, corporate culture to make sure it is somewhere that other people want to work, because I think, you know, some of the rebuttals I hear is that we just can't find the talent. And I'm like, well, I don't think you're looking hard enough, one. And two, I don't think you got to question why isn't it that they're not reaching out and applying to you like willingly and openly. So I think as businesses get their shit together, they're going to have to. I mean, like, you know, when I interviewed JD from MediaCom, like multicultural marketing is tripling year on year. Like, and it's already like, you know, Google, I think not Google, but Disney, Pixar, and NBC, and they're all investing in this like new majority initiative where they're trying to work out how to make media strategies inclusive. It's coming, you know, like it's coming. So it's something they're going to have to get their heads around if they want to stay viable from a commercial point of view, but also from an integrity point of view. Just as a human being, you should be doing it. Like it's just no questions asked there. So I'm wondering, in the interim, while all these people are getting their shit together, and I don't mean that in a disrespectful way, it's just that that's just been what has been the lay of the land, and it's new news for them, and it's very upsetting for a lot of them to go, holy crap, we got to dismantle and rebuild, and that's going to take time. So obviously you in that position of power was able to influence getting Kashmir in. That's a freaking easy win, right? For Google, for Kashmir, for Pixel, everyone. In the meantime, when there's, I guess, not the right diversity of mix in these organizations, so whether it's advertising agencies or brands, what are your recommendations about how people should go about bringing that right mixology in? Because like to use an example, like African-American culture, or Black culture as you want to call it, is the most globally influential in the world, without a doubt, in terms of fashion, innovation, even AAVE. A lot of hidden figures are starting to come to light as well. Like people are starting to don't even realize the origins of where a lot of their culture and things come from, like boxer braids, and why that's not appropriate for anyone else but Black women to wear. You know, don't get me started on how yoga has been colonized, and Western spirituality and all that sort of stuff. And I don't think it's been done maliciously. It's just like, they're like, mine, and now it's ours. So I'm wondering, like, in terms of, and it's a topic that's coming up more and more now in terms of cultural appreciation versus cultural appropriation. Because I think a lot of people don't even realize where they're stealing from, or because it's stealing, essentially. They're stealing from, like, I even saw a clip on TikTok about these white college students dragging Kamala Harris when she got elected with a rap song. I mean, what in the ignorant privilege is that? But that's happening a lot. And there was another case, I think, recently in Texas, 3 white girls. And it sounds like I'm ragging on white people. I'm not, but it's just that they are the central narrative at the moment. So everything's going to be in context of them. They redid a mahjong set because they didn't feel it fit their aesthetic, and that the current mahjong sets were too boring or something like that. Not knowing how offensive that would be, because it's like a couple of centuries old tradition. You know, I used to play it with my grandfather. I'm like, what the fuck, when I saw that? So what would your advice be for people that are, I guess, sensitized to this topic and going, okay, we know we need to do things more inclusively and do things more authentically, but if we look around our boardroom table, we kind of look like we're auditioning for Cocoon. How do we do this in the right way with the right partners to make sure that we get an outcome that's amazing for everyone?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good one. I think, well, on one side you have this tension, which is like, it's nothing new that to sell somebody, you need to find something to attach it to, so that people get, for the most part, so people get excited about it. So that's like, whatever the cultural zeitgeist is of the moment, like, just find a way to put those people in our ads, steal some of the fashion thing. Like, so this is, I get the driver of it. And again, when you've got the company, you're moving at a certain speed, you've got the money, you've got the blind spots. It's just, what are we doing to connect with consumers, right? Like, that has been the norm for so long. And obviously we live in a world now where people have platforms to sort of call it out, to sort of fight back. So you have to take a much more sort of discreet approach, and have the right consultants, have your teams look a certain way. To your point, it takes a while to build the teams, but the consultants, it's like, that just comes from a, we need to be careful here because there's a downside now, right? You have to be aware of the risk. So now that the risk are going to possibly hit someone's bottom line because of the power of the internet and social and consumers, I would hope that people would start to build this consideration into their processes, to the teams that are like nearest and dearest to some of these initiatives, to make sure there's an evaluation criteria, to make sure there's a consideration for, and I've seen this, like Google has this, for people that are creating consumer-facing marketing and ads, just having a source to go to be able to say, like, we want to do this, we haven't baked it yet, but let's just make sure there's no sensitive material here, we understand the history, the context. It doesn't take that much for a large company to sort of build that function in. That's a way agencies can be more value added, right? So like, if you're a dominant agency, like, and I've seen other agencies adopt this model, pull on a smaller multicultural agency to serve as that consultant, right, for their work as well as on the clients that they have's behalf. So I do think it just, if you care enough and you understand the potential risk, you will sort of operationalize some of this. I think to strengthen that, attaching objectives and like metrics to some of these things within an organization, so that at a leadership level, there's an expectation that you will have a narrative to tell and you'll have some proof points for how you've delivered on this, how you've shown awareness of this, how you've sort of pushed it into your teams and thereby into the culture of the place. where's that top-down accountability for at least the awareness and the consideration, so that things get caught in the gaps before they make it too far, so that people in the organization see that this is important, this is a priority, and we're on the hook for delivering this. You got to approach it like anything else of value coming out of that company, or that, in terms of value creation in the company. This is important enough. It holds risk, it holds benefits, but we got to be set up operationally and from a cultural perspective to be able to like have this be an ingrained behavior. So I think there's a lot within that a company can take and make their own, but it does come down to accountability, putting it into the culture, and having, like you said, the right partners to sort of reveal some of your blind spots.
Yeah, it's you definitely measure what you treasure, hey. And I think if we're going to be regimented about measuring things like market share or sales or award entries, we can be as focused on measuring things like that, like putting in accountability steps, I guess, for inclusion throughout, without having it. Of course, it needs to be a meritocracy and all that sort of stuff, but I think while we're all learning the muscle memory to have this be intuitive rather than sort of clumsy, which it will be for a little while, because it is a new process, I think, for a lot of people. There just needs to be that top-down accountability and commitment. I think, it's one thing to force people to do something, but like to be committed to something has an entirely different energy around it, right? It's like, eating your veggies because your mum won't let you out if you don't, versus eating them because it's going to be good for you. It's two very different decision-making processes, and, inspired.
Much slower too.
Yeah. Exactly.
One point to add to that just you made me think about, there's also the like assessment audit piece of this, which is like, before you look forward and have a plan, just look backwards to be like, where do we have gaps? Like, we do a thing on my team where we have a certain amount of assets and people in the assets. We now know like where we are reflecting stereotypes and we need to not in the future. We know where we overcompensate for certain groups within our spots, but don't in other, from an accessibility standpoint, or sort of body positivity. So it doesn't take that much to look at what you've already done to say, like, where could we be better, and have that be your starting place.
Yeah, because I think the upside is incredible, because I think at the moment the focus is around disaster prevention, like making sure that you're not offending certain groups and you're not going to get shot down in social media. But I think once organizations bake in this cadence and this muscle memory, the amplification of being so deeply connected into culture and different groups and stuff like that is wild. Like, so if you look at someone like Ben and Jerry's, like, it's so baked into their DNA. They're not worried about offending people. They're worried about how to systemically change the future for the better for everyone. So that's kind of when I speak to leaders, I'm like, that's the differential in the mindset. And this is why you're racing, because you're getting from here, which is disaster prevention, to like pioneering innovation. That's the benefit of getting this right. But
build familiarity with the potential opportunity and the sort of value and the upside of it, but then also build an awareness of the increasing downside and risk of it, right? Like, we no longer live in a world where things can be straight down the middle, or not pick a side, or be like vague. And, it's just, people are empowered with tools and platforms, and they're going to call you out. So I think you just will get to a place where, those that are smart enough will understand, like, there's a business imperative, but there's also sort of an upside for the bottom line in like dedicating the right amount of energy and focus to this.
Yeah, totally. I've got two more questions for you. Yeah. So the second last one is, I guess, reflecting on your career path to date. You've noted previously that Tiffany Warren and Jason White have been very instrumental in shaping you as a person and as a leader. And I was wondering if you could expand on that and why, and if there's anyone else, I guess, that's been, instrumental for you being where you are today.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I can't say those names without me sort of cracking a smile and getting warm fuzzies. Both long-standing mentors, people I hugely respected within the marketing and advertising industry. Now Tiffany's in music and Jason's in cannabis. But
Sure.
just they both are people that live by that, keep putting yourself in new and uncomfortable situations. But why individually, why they mean so much to me? Tiffany ran the Multicultural Advertising Internship Program, a program that was a feeder for students of color to become interns in advertising, an industry that was notoriously non-diverse. She provided me with my opportunity to sort of get my first internship. She extended a second opportunity. We became very close. She became a mentor of mine. She moved on from leading that program, but she actually is the person that started Ad Color. That's part of why that, like, receiving that award was so special. And no, she's not the only person that gets to decide who gets the award, so it was a fair process. I remember her showing me a napkin where she drew out this thing and said, I have a vision to make this thing, and like that's what the award looks like. So she created this thing. So, and she's continuing to add to it. And there's so much representation within that community for all of the groups we're talking about collectively, whether it be sort of accessibility, LGBTQ, sort of ethnic and cultural identities, from Asian to Latinx to African American. There are these cohorts and these spinoffs, and they all come together in that moment, but they have just become their own force. And I remember this woman showing me on a napkin this thing that she was going to create, and it, like, I can't imagine in the next 10 years what this thing is going to evolve into. So she's a mentor. She ran that program. She's responsible for so much of where I am today. We stay in very close contact. Jason White, along that path of being an intern, I was at Saatchi & Saatchi in New York. I was working on YoPlay and Progresso Soup. The only Black person who I thought was in the building, being myself as an intern, didn't know what I was doing, a lot of imposter syndrome. Saw this guy over there who looked just like me. This is a young Jason White. And he took me under his wing, even though I wasn't on his team as an intern, took me to my first print shoot for Tide. Still have the picture, imagine print shoots. And, ever since he took me under his wing at that point, because he saw the commonality and understood that he could give back in that way, just become super close friends and a mentor. He went on to be CMO at Beats. He's done a bunch of awesome work. He was at Widen in China. So a lot of his experience of going international sort of inspired my experience. So he lives in LA. I've already given the heads up that I'm moving out there, but he's also a person that means the world to me. And he's also the reason I'm at Google, because the guy who hired me at Google, who looked like me and created an opportunity for me, I didn't know him before. His name was Jabari Hearn. He's good friends with Jason. There's like 7 of us. We all know each other. He called Jason and said, I need this type of person in this role. Do you know anybody good to put up for consideration? That's how I got the job at Google. So this is like a 20-year run of the gift that keeps on giving, the knowledge that I can keep learning, and the sort of inspiration that I keep getting from those two, and so many more. But yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of an infinite pay it forward, isn't it? So like what they've done for you is what you're doing for so many thousands of people now. Hopefully in turn, they'll all do the same for the people they can kind of affect. And I think that's how we'll get there.
Mm-hmm.
But so final question for you is, like, obviously, like, we've discussed a lot of like pretty heavy topics, and it's and it's inspiring. But I think, when I speak to people like you, it's the only way they know how to be. You don't get a choice otherwise. Like, I wish I could, not give a shit about all of this stuff and just, I don't know, weed baskets on the side of a beach. But there's just something that I think we both share, that you just go, it's the right thing to do. And I've got to do it no matter what, how steep that hill is. So as your final question, I'm wondering, as a piece of advice, anyone that's deciding to kind of embark on this journey, I guess, of integrity, and sort of pushing against the system to kind of, affect change in a positive way and sort of bring everyone together. What sort of, I guess, self-care tips or rituals or habits have you learnt have been beneficial for yourself so that you can keep going another day. So like when I do a lot of pro bono work with activist groups, and they said they're very, very dedicated about self-care, because you have to be. Because if you're not looking after yourself, you can't possibly be giving to the people that you need to take care of. And I think even, was it Rosa Parks or someone? She did yoga, I read back in the day.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
Sort of keep her energy up so that she could continue to do activism all the time. So
Wow.
I wonder if there's anything that you've learned along your way, because I think you also mentioned that with everything you've achieved, you come full circle and go, God, what I really want now is just more time, freedom and balance to work on my personal pursuits. So as you say, when you're working in this space and doing so much in your professional job, as well as things on the side, and also sitting with some of these issues, which are really, really hardcore, what are the things you do to go, all right, let's recharge, or what are the habits and the mindsets that are helpful, you think have been for you, that other people might benefit from? Like you say, it's not overnight, it's a generational change, and we probably won't see the true impact of it in our lifetime. But, you know, that's kind of, I guess, one of the commitments of leadership is that you'll plant trees that you never sit under the shade of. So you got to keep going.
Yeah, it's a very fitting question to be the last question, because this is like, I'm at the beginning of that journey, if I'm being honest. I've always been into like staying active and like physical fitness, some level of strength training and all that. And that was just kind of a thing that, again, was part of my identity, but I didn't realize until some very recent years, where like moving around to jobs, maybe not having as much time for it, being super stressed, the role that it played in sort of giving me a little bit of balance. It was doing that without me realizing it. And then like diving into tech in this new job and like neglecting that really let me realize, like viscerally on a day-to-day basis, how this is what it feels like to not have that in your life. So I carved out that time. I'd have to wake up at 5 a.m. and do whatever. And that's kind of still what I do. Pandemic has just added to that, right? Because I'm on a computer from 8 a.m., 9 a.m. till 8 p.m. And like nonstop. So I have to have that time in the morning. But now I'm like, all right, growth mindset. I'm in the driver's seat here. Let me treat this like I treat a professional pursuit. So over a month and a half ago, I was like, all right, let me make a plan and a strategy for, and again, I don't want to make it seem like it's that impressive. Like I was like mapping things out like weird science over here, but I was just like, all right, like, how do I want to grow? How do I want to create that balance? Because again, it's not going to just be gifted to me. One of the areas I aligned on was meditation. And like, luckily through Google, there's a lot of access to mental health and tools and all. And I'm like, let me take advantage of the benefit of being at Google and having access to this stuff. So for the past month and a half, I've been creating a morning routine and a night routine. And the morning routine is like wake up at 5:30, go drink some water, meditate, and then read, and like sit in a massage chair, drink some tea, get up, go to the gym. That's me. Don't even like check that email. Don't look at it. And I'm like, sometimes I'm bad at that. Sometimes I'm better at it. But like my little bubble. Then when I come back, take a shower, I'm ready to like, all right, I'm that much better of a person. When I'm, when that has started my day, and I have been making that a habit. And then at night, put the phone down a little earlier. I've always like not watched a ton of TV, but just like even now, it just seems even more like wasteful. I'm just like, okay, I need to re-energize and not be distracted. And sometimes the distraction is what you need. But yeah, how can I get better sleep? Make sure I get my 8 hours. So this is the beginning of a journey for me to say, like, how do I grow in these areas, reinvest in self? But yeah, those physical fitness, meditation, better sleep. Yeah, diet depends on the day.
Yeah, it's so simple, isn't it? But it's so hard to do, because we're sort of hardwired that as soon as we wake up, we get on the treadmill and start running towards the fire. But the solution is just really painfully obvious. It's just an intentional commitment to making space for yourself and prioritizing yourself every day, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a few YouTube channels that I kind of stumbled upon, but now I love them. Like, because since I was working at home, they're like motivational, and they just splice together like speeches and videos. There's one called Motiversity. There's one called Mulligan Brothers. That gives me so much energy to take on the day.
Yep.
So like, there's a lot of those that are about how you start your day is like, and how you like protect that time for yourself. So some of that inspiration came from even that.
Well, awesome. Well, I hope you keep looking after yourself, because we need you doing what you're doing and having an incredible impact professionally and personally and just as a human being in this world. You're amazing. And I hope you know that. And I hope that you feel at some point soon that you don't need to try as hard as you do, because you just rocking up as you is fucking more than enough. And you're having such an incredible impact on everyone. Like, I listened to all your interviews and your podcasts and stuff, and you could hear it. You can hear people light up and be inspired and take that on, and you hope they pay it forward too. So thank you for your time.
No, thank you, Jen Chin, for creating this, providing a platform, thinking of others, being led by that, this being so central to your purpose, you being an even more amazing human being. I love that this is sort of like had our planets smash into each other once again. So like, no, all the thanks goes to you, and like the pleasure is mine. And I love what you've created here. And like, it's just such a testament to you and what you care about. And like, to your point about like, you are enough, like you are enough. And we need more people like you in the world, because again, this is like little seedlings of change and perspective and lived experience and proximity and real talk and all that. Like, we're all adults on this journey, and we should be having the conversations that make it easier for other people to experiment, explore, see what they need to do, but just knowing that they have that part of them that cares just as much or sees things this way and wants to push the arc of history in a certain direction. So you're giving voice to a lot of people, and you're providing a tool for a lot of other people. So I appreciate that.
Thank you. That's so kind. And yeah, that means a lot to me coming from you. So I don't know what else to say, but I hope I get to see you in some wanker location when lockdown is like a can with Cascade again.
Yeah, what's third on that list after Can and Cascade? Like,
that's something really obnoxious in me there.
It's like the Champs-Élysées or something else like that, like something that I'm gonna mispronounce and butcher and like not care, but like, yeah, there.
Let's do that. But in the meantime, I'm so grateful for you, Dhane. Thank you so much again for your time. Good luck with your move to LA. I look forward to hearing about your new life and adventures there. And I hope the packing isn't too painful.
All right. Thank you. It was so good to have this experience and to have dialogue with you and to see you. Thank you. And I'm here as a tool and a vessel, however you need me.
Vice versa. 17-1, anytime you need.
All right.
All right. Have an awesome day, Dhane.
You too. Let me know if you need anything.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.